What to do when you've been triggered.
Have you ever felt like a marionette controlled by the past? Where one tug of the strings sends you swirling into rage or despair without warning? If so, you've likely been emotionally triggered. Triggers can make us erupt like volcanoes at the slightest provocation. But with awareness, we can defuse these landmines before they detonate and cause destruction. Today, we'll provide a map through the minefield by defining triggers, explaining common patterns, and sharing techniques to navigate triggers skillfully in relationships and daily life. Let's cut the strings to the past and step into our empowered present.
What are emotional triggers?
A trigger is an event that activates a tidal wave of intense emotion, anger, panic, shame, grief. A relatively minor situation suddenly ignites a psychological, emotional firestorm within us. You experience a past wound right in the present moment. It's like the emotional memories we've buried underground start leaking toxic fumes we can't ignore. For example, Caleb grew up with a father who constantly criticized his foolish choices. Now, as an adult, Caleb's boss gives him some constructive feedback on a project. Caleb is instantly flooded with shame and the belief he is incompetent. His boss's words triggered the emotional pain tied to his dad's criticism.
The destructive trigger cycle.
Being triggered initiates an unhealthy reaction cycle. 1. The trigger occurs. 2. We react emotionally. 3. We utilize unhealthy coping methods. This 3-step waltz just strengthens the neural pathways connected to the trigger, making future reactions more intense. It also harms our relationships, as loved ones get caught in the crossfire of our unpredictable outbursts or withdrawal. Let's break down an example. 1. Trigger. Caleb's boss gives project feedback. 2. Reaction. Caleb feels crushed and worthless. 3. Coping. Caleb isolates himself and drinks excessively. Rinse and repeat. Soon, Caleb dreads any time his boss wants to chat.
Common triggers we may encounter.
While triggers are unique to each person, some frequent categories include sensory cues, sounds, images, or scents tied to past events. Actions like yelling, criticism, or rejection. Physical sensations like restraint or feeling crowded. Meaningful dates like birthdays or anniversaries. People, places, or things related to trauma. Triggers are often subtle, but resurrect emotional wounds when we least expect them to. Let's explore positive ways to respond.
Identifying your personal trigger patterns.
Start by reflecting on your common triggers. What situations tend to spark excessive reactions in you? After a triggering incident, ask yourself, what specific words, actions, or stimuli set me off? What physical signs or thoughts tipped me off I was triggered? What themes or patterns do I notice around my triggers? Tracking triggers in a journal provides insightful clarity. For example, a woman realized she frequently feels triggered when her husband doesn't immediately respond to her texts. This taps into core fears of abandonment rooted in her childhood. Awareness of our triggers is power. It allows us to catch rising reactivity and employ coping skills before drowning in the emotional riptide.
Calming your nervous system in the moment.
When triggered, our sympathetic nervous system revs up like a sports car, peeling out at top speed. Calming techniques put on the brakes. Useful strategies include deep belly breathing. Slowing the exhale activates the calming vagus nerve. Tapping therapies like EFT to release fight or flight hormones. Mindfulness and grounding using the 5 senses. Describe what you see, hear, feel right now. Challenging distorted thoughts and replacing with rational perspectives. For instance, when a man feels his anger rising as his wife forgets their anniversary, he pauses to breathe deeply. He taps his chest while reminding himself this was an unintentional oversight, not a personal attack. This calms his body so he can respond with understanding rather than just reacting.
Preventative measures and lifestyle factors.
We can't fully control triggers, but certain lifestyle changes help raise our reactivity threshold day to day. Reducing alcohol, recreational drugs, and stimulants. Prioritizing sleep, nutrition, exercise, nature. Developing emotional intelligence, naming feelings, V's acting on them. Building a support system for reality checks. Using trigger warnings for potentially traumatic content. Setting healthy boundaries in relationships and work. When we're well rested, well fed, and well supported, it becomes easier to stay grounded when triggers arise. We may still feel activated, but can process it skillfully instead of lashing out.
Navigating triggers in close relationships.
For ongoing relationships, open communication about triggers is vital. Some tips: lovingly explain your sensitivities. Ask for patience as you improve. Discuss any content warnings that could help prevent triggering. Share the best ways to comfort you when triggered. Apologize after overreactions. Take responsibility. Don't justify. Seek counseling together to navigate recurring trigger patterns. This mutual understanding prevents hurt and disconnection when triggers inevitably happen. For example, a husband emails his wife,
Hey, sweetheart, I wanted to share something I'm working on. I really get triggered when I feel like my opinions are ignored or dismissed. It takes me back to always feeling less than around my parents. I may still get defensive, but I'm trying to improve. Please know it's not your fault, and I appreciate your support.
His wife then makes an effort to really listen and validate her husband's perspective, even when disagreeing. He also takes ownership when he does overreact, sincerely apologizing for the impact. This replaces shame with growth.
Seeking professional help when needed.
While we can make great progress through self-work, counseling provides immense healing for stubborn wounds. Seeking help is not weakness. It takes courage to support our growth. Signs you may benefit from guidance include triggers worsening instead of improving over time, triggers continually causing relationship conflicts or job loss, feeling constantly on edge, waiting to be triggered, numerous severe trigger episodes each week, suicidal thoughts during triggered states. You deserve to feel inner peace. Don't tough it out alone if you need support. Healing is a team effort.
Healing the emotional roots of triggers.
For lasting change, we must get to the heart of our trigger's origins. Reflecting on the core wounds or beliefs being activated facilitates deep healing. Some questions for exploration. Why did this situation ignite such intense emotions in me? What core fears or sensitivities did this awaken? How did this remind me of painful times earlier in life? What old messages about myself or others does this trigger renew? For example, Caleb might uncover, I felt crushed by my boss's feedback because it tapped into my belief that I'm fundamentally inadequate. It reminded me of my dad constantly labeling me as incompetent and foolish growing up. This experience revived those old feelings of shame and self-doubt I thought I'd overcome. Our triggers point to where emotional healing is still needed. Their roots can be pulled out through sharing vulnerabilities, reframing narratives, or professional counseling.
Releasing toxic shame around triggers.
Many triggers involve feeling defective, judged, or exposed. In other words, they evoke shame. This toxic shame corrodes our self-worth and locks us in pain. Here are some ways to counteract shame when triggered. Remind yourself this reaction does not define you. You are not broken. Share vulnerably with safe friends or a support group. Their empathy will heal your sense of isolation. Separate past messages of unworthiness from your current truth. The past can't dictate your value now. Speak to yourself with the compassion you would show a dear friend struggling with the same trigger. Forgive yourself. Do things that make you feel capable, creative, and proud. Shame loses its grip when self-worth grows. If you lash out due to shame, make amends after calming down. This builds dignity. We cannot be shamed for having triggers. It means we are human. But we can liberate ourselves from shame's power over time through daily practices of self-compassion.
Learning to be present with triggers.
Often, we either resist triggers by shutting down emotionally or get lost indulging the painful stories they evoke. A third option exists, being mindfully present with the experience. By approaching triggers with open curiosity instead of judgment, their charge begins to neutralize. We gain power realizing we can bear these difficult emotions. Some steps for mindful trigger processing. Notice the sensations arising in your body. Where you feel tension or discomfort. Pay attention to your breathing. Breathe into and soften around any tightness. Notice any images, sounds, or memories that arise, without judging or following them down rabbit holes. Gently return attention to the breath. Label the emotions swirling, as if you're watching them pass by. There's anger arising. There's the sadness starting to peak. Remember, you're safe right now, even if it doesn't feel like it. These are just echoes of the past. Stay present with your experience until the intensity crests like a wave, then recedes back to equilibrium. Don't shame yourself if mindful presence feels difficult. It takes practice. Over time, it allows us to fearlessly witness these temporary states come and go.
Surrounding yourself with safety and support.